Welcome to Veterans Archives, where we are dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes. We hope you enjoy this story. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like and share our videos. Check us out across all social media. Be sure to like and share those pages as well. And for more information, go to www.veteransarchives.org.
I was reading the news help wanted section, and Southfield Dodge was advertising, no experience necessary, Well, later on I learned what that meant, but I thought, well, here we go. And the reason I wanted to do it is I had an uncle, my dad's youngest brother, was very successful with a Chevrolet dealer on the far east side of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Ewald Chevy, right on Jefferson. And when I was a boy, back in 1956, he came by the house with a brand new 56 Corvette Roadster and took me for a ride. It was black with red interior. I've got a model of it now.
Yeah.
But that, to me, was the coolest car ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always real good to me. I'm the oldest of five, so the rest of the kids were little,
Yeah.
didn't make much sense of anything, but I appreciated things.
Right.
And he was single at the time. So I get the benefits of being there at that time in his life.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so I always thought Uncle Jim was really a cool guy and had a neat job, play with cars and talk to people and make money. I had no idea what making money meant, but
You got to drive that cool car. It must have meant something.
Well, when I got back from California, it was 1983. Not long before the '84 models were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So I got hired by Southfield Dodge, and they put me through like a homespun crash course to learn the models, learn the equipment packages, learn the powertrains, so I could be able to answer questions intelligently of new car buyers.
Right.
And I applied myself. The good thing was, when I read something, I had it.
Right, you have a photographic memory, so.
I didn't have to go back a second time.
Right.
And of course, I had to read all not only the literature, I had to read all the sales pamphlets, and so I knew where stuff was to show people. And Southfield Dodge was going through a transition. It had just recently been bought by two guys, former car salesmen,
Mm-hmm.
Cini and Lopez. Cini was from Sardinia, and Lopez was from Mexican descent.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Lopez's dad financed the whole thing. I found that out later. So these two salesmen bought the store, and they were ready to go. They want to hit the ground running and make money. Of course, they had to staff it.
Right.
And there's always car guys looking for jobs. Like they're not happy with a manager somewhere, so they want to go somewhere else. New face, new everything. So anyway, I hadn't been actually trained to sell anything. I just my experience after the Marine Corps. Maybe I should go through there first. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I got a job with Wayne Oakland Bank as a head teller. I was trained for 2 weeks, and they sent me out to Clawson, where I worked for 5 years. And I was a head teller for a little over 2. And the Clawson office had a loan department upstairs. It was the central loan department for the whole bank, even though the home office was Royal Oak.
Right. Did you went in and cleaned up their loan office, didn't you?
Oh, I did wonderful up there.
I think we talked about this. Like you were.
Yeah, they put me in collections, which they called the adjustment department.
Right, right.
So they adjusted me, and I adjusted the customers.
Yes, and you brought in. What was your percentage? It was 100%.
No, they were looking for a 10% recovery rate every month.
Yeah.
In other words, they would be happy if you could hit 10%.
Right.
My first month, I hit 90.
Yeah, yeah. I remember this.
They
so
basically said to me, nobody in the history of this business has ever had 90%. We don't know what you're doing, but keep it up.
Right. At first, though, didn't they think you were doing something dishonest, or they thought something was wrong with the computer?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
They paid a couple $1,000s to have the report rerun.
Wow. So you have that experience behind you before
Yeah.
you go do this job.
So I had. For me, it was common sense.
Right.
You
right.
know, that I was just applying common sense to new situations.
Right.
And it works out well. I've always been a problem solver. I've always had to figure things out, and sometimes I'd look at it from a different angle than anybody else and make a different adjustment, something nobody expected.
So how did this work out selling Dodges then?
Well, they finally put me on the floor. They gave me a little. We had a little offices. They gave me a little office, and they told me I'd be on the floor that night. Well, that night was the last night of the model year, so anything they could sell and get on paper counted toward as a total of their 83 business.
Mm-hmm.
And the total number of units and models that you sold by the end of the year counted for getting new ones for the next year. So if you wanted to be a big van driver, you better sell a lot of vans before the end of the year. If you wanted to be a good domestic, sedan saver, same thing.
Right.
And we had a new car on the Dodge inventory back then was the Dodge Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
It was a rename of a model that they had at one time, but this car was turbocharged, front wheel drive, a very zippy little car.
Oh yeah.
It had its growing pains, but it was, the amazing thing was the turbo was like a third generation turbo. The mechanics of the turbo solved a lot of problems that the Europeans were having.
Mm-hmm.
Volvos, for example, and things like that, were having problems with turbines overheating the bearings, and they'd freeze up. Well, Chrysler mounted the turbo on the block, but they cooled it with water in a water jacket and oil in another compartment. So you had, and of course, the water is going through the radiator and the oil's going through the oil cooler. So both of those would dissipate a lot of heat very well.
So it made it pretty reliable then.
And I thought it was an amazing piece of technology that they were smart enough to do that. And of course, that would be a sales point to use. A lot of the other guys had no idea what was under the hood.
Right. The car just looked cool.
You turned the key, it ran, and it was a car.
Right.
But for some guys that worked, not for me. I had to know everything about what I was selling. Anyway, they put me on the floor for that final sales night. They had a big promotion going. They advertised on TV, Southfield Dodge, blah, blah, blah. And if you came in and even just test drove a car, you got a box with 2 wine glasses in it. Lead crystal wine glasses. Chrysler supplied them. The dealers paid for them, but they got them from Chrysler. We ran out of wine glasses real quick. People were snatching those things up. So they gave me $100, told me to go to the hardware store. Guess what? Same wine glasses.
What a surprise.
They weren't in a Chrysler box, but
Right.
it was this. I looked at the same exact wine glasses. Local hardware. So, you know, I'd buy a bunch of wine glasses, take them back. We gave those away. Anyway, so I was kind of like a gopher on the job, you know.
Yeah.
I did whatever they needed. So that night, they let me loose on the floor. And so I get a customer. It's a family, husband, wife, 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are like young teens. And Dad had a business attitude and moderate business clothes on, and wife was nicely dressed. The kids were immaculate. I mean, they fresh clothes, everything pressed.
Yeah.
And it's like the old days, you know, you went out to buy a car, that was a big moment, you know.
Right. Right.
And what they wanted to do was price out a new Dodge 600 convertible, another new model.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have one of those cars at all. And we weren't going to get one because this store hadn't sold enough of anything to qualify. Yeah. So the only way to get it is with an order, a sold order. Anyway, pricing out cars doesn't pay anything at all. You get paid on deliveries, and you get paid the next month.
Right.
So when you're in a commission sales business, you better have room to stretch your finances away. I didn't care. I just wanted a foot in the door and get started. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I started pricing out this car for him, and I was describing the car and its equipment as I priced it out,
Mm-hmm.
asking the wife, you know, would you want this or that, or, you know, I mean, I'm assuming you want air conditioning, you know, for the days you put the top up when it's hot out and you don't want all the sun, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, there were sensible questions. They answered sensibly. They were educated people. They didn't take much to I didn't have to elaborate to get them to understand anything. And while I was doing all this, the husband kept anxiously looking out towards the front door, or the front window area. And we had a van outside. It was an '83 van. It started off as a Dodge.
Was it Caravan back then? Was it a Dodge Caravan?
No, not a Caravan. This was a van.
Oh, the large size van. Yeah.
This car originally didn't have windows or anything in it.
Uh-huh.
And we had it customized.
Oh, okay.
So you had the base price of the van plus about $3,500 of customizing.
Right. Oh, hang on.
Attention available staff and members. Please join us in the main lobby for the honors procession. Attention available staff and members. Please join us in the main lobby for the honors procession.
Yeah, member passed.
Oh, that's too bad.
So
he's looking at this van.
He's looking at, and finally he said something about, he says, and the van was it had a sale price right on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a bottom line price. I mean,
They're trying to get it off the lot.
They're trying to get it out there. It was the oldest item in inventory.
Uh-huh.
It was where they had the most money invested, and nobody was showing that van.
Right.
I mean, there was no interest. People coming in weren't asking about it, and the guys selling the cars weren't trying to promote it. Like, even asking regular customers, do you know anybody interested in a van, you know?
Yeah.
Well, this family was. And from the size of this family, I mean, there were already 4 of them, and if they brought friends with them to go anywhere, that Dodge 600 convertible is going to be maxed out.
Yeah. Or if they have any more kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the van had 4 captain's chairs in it, had plenty of room in the back. It had room for more.
Yeah.
Plus, it had a bed in the a fold-down couch that was a bed. So, you could have somebody sleeping back there while you drove across country. you
Right.
know.
I remember the conversion vans. It was kind of a
Yeah.
big deal back in
Oh,
the
yeah.
80s.
And in '83, this was actually a nicely done van. It wasn't gaudy, but it had flared fenders. It had the steps. It had a trailer hitch, trailer tow package on the chassis.
Right.
It was a pretty ready to go unit.
And you could take it home that day
Yeah.
if you wanted it.
You could drive it to church that weekend.
Right, right. So he's looking at this van while you're pricing out this car.
He's asking about the van.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, it's going to take me a while to get all this added up and go through it with the manager, which I'm required to do. I said, why don't you take that for a ride? And I went and got the keys. I got a dealer plate. It was a magnetic plate. I slapped it on the back, gave him the keys. I said, just take it for a ride, and I'll see you in 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, no. I'm not going to, I mean, I had to take a big picture of his license to make it legal, but, you know, for insurance purposes. But other than that, I just put them in it and sent them on their way. Well, Dad looked really good sitting up there in the captain's chair with a big van, you know. And
Oh, yeah.
Mom's hanging on to him like, oh boy, don't we look like something, you know. And they could see themselves in it in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, you know.
Right, right.
And the kids were thrilled to be in the captain's chairs in the back, you know. They were close enough to pass things back and forth, but not so close that it was a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
Not so close that they pull on each other or whatever.
Right.
Annoy one another. And so the sales manager was busy. He had people at his desk the whole time. This, like I said, this night was a big promotion. There's a lot of lights, a lot of stuff going on. He saw me, you know, taking people outside, and the next thing you know, he sees the van going down the road, and he looks at me like, and I just, you know, and I went back and finished pricing out the Dodge 600, and I brought that to him.
Uh-huh.
And he's looking at this what's happening? This is not a van. I said, no, this is a Dodge 600 convertible they want to price out. So he priced it out and slashed the list price and gave him a $50 over invoice price. You know.
Right.
It's just in and out to them, just a unit. And it won't happen for months, you know. In the meantime, the fan comes back, and the first thing they want to do when they come back in my office is give me the keys.
Mm-hmm.
So I take the keys back like nothing, you know. I said, oh, by the way, I said, I suppose you would like to look at the manual. And the minute that big guy took that manual from my hand, I knew I had him.
He owned that van, right?
I knew that was his. So now they're reading an owner's manual. You know how boring those things are.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
turn the air conditioner on, you do this, or flip the radio, to program the radio, do that. And they're going through it like it's a Bible, you know. And finally I give them the price on a convertible, and then, well, that's interesting. But by now they've realized that convertible is not going to fit their plans. They want to go on vacations.
Yeah.
With a new vehicle. And a convertible versus a custom van, no, there is no comparison. So they bought the van.
Mm-hmm.
So next thing you know, I'm in front of the manager's desk with a check for deposit and a sales order for the van. And he looks at me like I'm the man from Mars.
Right.
His name was Jerry Shu, HSU. He was Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
But he was sharp, and I think basically he was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the car business, the Dodge car business. So he had to be a snake, but,
Right.
you know, Dodge is like the bottom of the barrel. And anyway, Jerry was, I mean, I could see he was actually thrilled. I thought maybe he thought he was thrilled for me for doing a good job. So he signs everything, and you know, they give me a receipt for the check.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the deal was I had to have, it did not have a trailer hitch on it. I had to put one on it.
Okay.
So part of the deal was I had to add a trailer hitch, and that was the only thing. and was a place right down the street that would do that. So it's like, it's my time. I got to take the thing down, get it done, and bring it back.
Yeah.
So anyway, it turned out that big sales event, I was the only guy that sold anything.
Oh.
The only salesman that made a sale was the new guy on the block with no training.
Mm-hmm.
Sold the oldest unit in inventory and the most expensive unit in inventory. And we delivered. I took the van down, got the hitch, delivered the van, and the fellow that bought it was the #1 guy for Prudential Life Insurance down the street.
Oh.
He ran the office. He was the big boss. So he was going to go to work in his new van, show everybody.
Yeah.
And I mean, he could see himself going places with this van that I couldn't even imagine. He had already had it mapped out in his head.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of times a vehicle purchase like a house is kind of an emotional purchase.
Oh, it's not it's the second biggest purchase most people make in their lives.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just a business transaction.
Yeah. And hopefully, as a salesman, you just made a friend for life,
Right. He's going to tell his friends, and he's going to come
Yeah.
back when he needs another car. All of that.
That's how you make it in the car business.
Right.
It's all referrals.
So how long did you stay at this place?
90 days.
Oh, okay. So what happened and where did you go?
What happened was the sales event was on a Wednesday, I believe.
Uh-huh.
It was the last day of the month. And Friday, we were getting all ready to go home for the week. We didn't work on the weekends. We're getting ready to leave the business. And as everybody was leaving, Jerry waved me over and says, stay behind a minute. I want to talk to you a minute. So I stayed behind. The showroom's empty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what was going on in the shop, but showroom's empty. And Jerry's sitting at his desk and says to me, "You want to know what you would have made with that van?" And I just stood straight up and I said, "Wait a minute. What do you mean would have made?" He says, "Well, you were on probation. Your job doesn't actually really start until Monday." So what they did was they stole my commission. They gave it to some guy that they had that had been a good salesman at one time, but he had fallen in hard times. He hadn't made any money in a long time. The commission on the van was $400.
It's a lot of money.
Which was better than anything else we had in inventory. There was a bonus just to get it out the door.
Yeah.
So they gave it to him. I almost went over the desk. I was pretty hot.
Yeah.
And it was a situation where, fortunately, my humanness came through.
Right.
And I said, "Explain to me how that works." And he basically said, "Well, we had you sign a paper to be a salesman, but it didn't start until Monday. In other words, it was dated for next week.
Right.
You were just supposed to be training with people this week." I said, "I spent 2 weeks learning all the material. You let me loose on the floor for one night. I sold the most expensive and oldest thing on the lot, got it out of your hair, and you're stealing my commission? We're going to make it up to you. We're going to put you with one of their other experienced salesmen who handled fleet orders."
Mm-hmm.
He says, we're going to have you work with him. You're going to own half the business. Whatever the fleet manager does, you get half. And you can still sell on the floor when you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounded pretty good, except there was no fleet business. They bid on things.
Right.
They would bid on police cars, city trucks, I mean, all kinds of Chrysler, Dodge equipment. They never won any deals, not one. They weren't politically connected.
Yeah.
So their orders or bids, they just didn't get seen. Didn't matter how good they were. You know, it was all politics. And maybe it was partly bribes too. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, I worked for them for 90 days. And the way the Dodge dealers worked was they would advertise no experience necessary. They would get salespeople in. They would get you to give them a list of your friends and relatives for referrals.
Uh-huh.
Try and get you to sell as many cars as you could to that crowd. And then send you on your way and get another batch in for 90 days. And that was the routine. That wasn't exceptional. That was routine. That's
Sort of
just how they did things.
Yeah.
So they weren't planning on keeping anybody new for over 90 days anyway. If you weren't an old buddy from somewhere in the business years ago, you didn't stay. They didn't care how good you did. And if you hit something out of the park like I did, it was a fluke. So they were shooting themselves in the foot.
Right. They were looking short term.
They were losing good people just because this was their policy of brooming through people through every 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much pissed me off.
Right.
And I thought, well, if that's the way I want to do it, I don't want to be here anyway. And one other little problem they had with the new Dodge Daytona, they delivered one, and the customer brought it back and says, it's making noises. Something's vibrating, and I can't figure it out. So they put it in the shop. It was there for 2 to 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
They drove it around. They couldn't figure it out. So I'm standing there one day, and they got the car idling. And it was a gorgeous car, really. I mean, the paint scheme was phenomenal. And I loved driving them. They were a really hot little car to drive.
Oh, yeah.
They made the mistake of letting me out in a Chrysler test track with one. And they had an engineer ride with me.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like, well, you go with all these trainee drivers and see if they got any questions, intelligent questions about the car and that. And so I'm out driving with this guy, and I was really impressed with the turbo.
Mm-hmm.
They had developed a car that had no turbo lag at all. You step on the gas, you had it right then.
Yeah.
And they had also changed the length of the control arms to the front wheels so that there was no oversteer on one side or the other. It was even.
Mm-hmm.
So this car tracked really well. And the suspension held the ground pretty good. It wasn't a 911 Porsche,
right.
But it would have been like a 900 Porsche.
Right, right. It's the poor man's Porsche,
it
right?
had 4 wheels, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm driving down this track, and I'm coming up to an intersection. And this guy says, yeah, it's pretty good suspension. I said, well, let's find out. I said, have you ever done a 90-degree turn?
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, no. And I went around that corner at 90 degree left. I went around that corner like in a 4-wheel drift with the gas full on,
Uh-huh.
And he's hanging on for dear life, And the car just stayed perfectly fine. It didn't rock or roll or anything. I said, yeah, I slowed down. I'd gotten up to about 55 miles an hour in a 25 turn, you know.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, I said, that's pretty impressive. He says, you say so. Like, I've never done that before. Anyway, I took him back intact. Anyway, so they got this turbo idling, and I'm listening to it, and I can hear this bzzz kind of a sound, you know, something vibrating. And there was a guy lighting a cigarette. One of the mechanics was lighting a cigarette, using a matchbook.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulled out like the last match. He was going to toss the book. I said, "Can I have that?" He said, "Sure." So I took the matchbook, closed the cover, folded it in half. I opened the hood, and there's a panel on the hood that catches rain, so that won't rain on, you know, it's air ducted, but it's like a rain catcher. It's got a little drain on one side, so it goes over the side of the engine, doesn't hit anything. But this thing is held on with 2 rivets. So the thing is vibrating. So I took the matchbook, shoved it in there, closed the hood, and I said, "Fixed." Nobody could, I mean, they got all those mechanics looking at each other like, well, duh, you know, how could I not see that?
Right.
You know.
The simplest answer is usually the right one.
I mean, it wasn't a permanent fix. You'd have to make some adjustment, but for just to demonstrate what the fix would be, it worked. So anyway, like I said, I worked for them 90 days, and I had been gypped on my first commission. I did sell a few more cars.
Yeah.
I actually sold them off the used lot, so I made a few $100s,
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Thanks for the experience. I'm out of here. Look, I'll never sell Dodge again."
Right.
So I went down the road on foot looking. You know, I ended up at Livonia Oldsmobile, and walked in the door and got hired. Asked me what experience I had. I said, "Well, for 90 days I worked at the Dodge store." And I told them the story about the van. They said, "You know, yeah, you'll do okay here." And I did. Like I said, within a month I was a number 2.
Right. Right.
And
Well, we were talking about that. You were consistently number 2.
yeah, I was always number 2. I could never get to number 1.
Number 1 came and went, but number 2, you were always there.
Fortunately, number 2 got the same prize as number 1
Right.
got. So
Yeah, you just didn't get the prestige of being number 1.
yeah.
Yeah.
But most of the time, number 1 was a friend of mine named Jerry Galda.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we got to be friends. Jerry was a former iron worker, but he was a tall guy, lean, gregarious, very friendly to people. And his favorite saying is, "Don't make me bring your whole family together." Yeah, I don't know what that means, but you know,
Right.
I heard it 100 times. Anyway, and I was working with a variety of interesting individuals. One guy was like an old-time salesman. He'd been selling cars for 100 years, you know.
Right. Been around a little while.
Yeah. And he had the nice clothes to show for it. I mean, he knew how to dress to work with the public.
Yeah.
He was always well-groomed, well-mannered. And one night that winter, well, I should tell you, the way we determined who got the next customer was who went out front and greeted the next customer.
Mm-hmm.
You would take turns. So here we are in the middle of winter. The sleet is blowing, the wind's blowing. He's standing out there in this big, thick coat, muffler, and a fedora, you know, waiting for the next customer.
Right.
If there is a next customer. So I get out there. I'm number 2 behind him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I start giving him this stuff. And after a few minutes, he's shaking and shaking. He goes inside. I got the next customer. And one other thing was funny about that. It would rain occasionally, like April. You know,
Oh, yeah.
April showers. We get rain, and I always took my umbrella to work, and I kept it in my desk drawer. Well, not all the guys had enough sense to go buy an umbrella, but they'd steal mine.
Well, you had one, and they might as well use it, right?
Yeah. So somehow they get into my drawer without me seeing them there. I'd be distracted or something. And next thing you know, it's raining, and they're outside getting customers, and nobody's walking in the showroom.
Mm-hmm.
I had a broken umbrella at home, so I brought it in, put it in my drawer. And this umbrella was one of those pop-up types, except the retaining ring had broken off. So the next time one guy grabbed my umbrella, he runs outside to greet a customer, and it's a nice older couple, right? They're getting out of their car and it's raining. He runs out to them, smiles, presses the button, and the umbrella goes flying across the parking lot. And he's sitting here holding a stick, and they're looking at him like, "What kind of idiot are you?" Yeah. I come out the door with a real umbrella and walk him in. My customer.
There you go.
I sold him a car.
There you go. Now, how long were you there? How long were you at Livonia Oldsmobile?
14 months.
Okay. So just these short stints so far. So where did you go?
Yeah, I worked 5 years first place.
Right.
I worked over 8 years for Scott Coburn Saddlery,
Yeah.
and now I'm just trying to keep a job more than a year. You know?
Right. Yeah, the car business is kind of a churn.
Yeah. Well, the problem was Oldsmobile was closing,
Yeah.
so the inventory was drying up. Our most popular cars were the Cutlass Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have any Cutlass Sierras. Well, actually, we had 5, and they were all demos that belonged to salesmen.
Right.
One of them was mine. So you had to bring it to work every day, freshly washed, park it, and allow anybody else to drive it, to demo the car, or to even sell the car. In which case, they didn't have any other ones to get you, so now what did you do?
Right. You were out.
You were out. Well, through the first year, I wanted a car myself.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to buy a Tornado. I loved the Tornado. It looked right. I had long legs that fit me well. My friends were 6'5",
Yeah.
you know, and it was a very nice riding car, beautiful car. So one day we got a trade-in. It was a 1-year-old Olds Caliente, Tornado Caliente, which was the top line package. Leather, chrome strip up the door, really classy car.
All the good stuff.
Well, the general sales manager wanted that for a demo. And he could have it for as long as he wanted it and then sell it, you know.
Yeah.
So he had the car detailed, came out of the detail shop, and the manager there was a guy named Jim. And I had gotten to know him hanging around the dealership. And Jim had his crew detail the car. They put it out front to let it dry out, you know, in the sun. It was a nice day. And the boss went out, opened the door, and damn near died. And I heard later, he described it as, it smells like there's a dead body in there.
Oh, no.
I mean, this beautiful car reeked. It was awful. And if you've ever smelled a decaying body,
Yeah.
That's what it smelled like.
Yeah. It's an awful smell. Ugh.
So anyway, they ran it through detailing again, had it all vacuumed and perfumed and everything, put it out front. It was just as bad as before. So the general manager knew I knew something about cars. He says, Don, go out there and analyze that car. Tell me what's wrong with it. He didn't tell me what the problem was.
Right.
Okay, so I go out, I open the door and I sit down. I go, oh God. And I'm looking around the car. And I got out and I inspected the roof. And somebody had installed a half roof, they call it, which was a heavily padded vinyl top.
Yeah, like a Landau.
A Landau.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, those things are fine if you do it properly. And because that's a modification that cuts off the drain system on the roof, you've got to have a supplemental drain.
Mm-hmm.
Something that won't interfere with the car. Well, somebody decided to run that drain so that it drained inside. And they figured it would be fine. So that told me what I wanted to know.
Uh-huh.
So I went back to Jim, the delivery guy, and I said, Jim, have your guys pull the rear seat cushion out of the car, completely out. Tell me what you find. So it took them a few minutes, but they got a couple guys out there and they got the rear seat cushion out. It was a mushroom farm.
Oh.
Mushrooms were like this big.
Oh, no, no.
8 inches across.
No.
So everything you're smelling was spores.
Yeah.
And, you know, mushrooms are damp. They hold moisture, so
They stink.
it was like a wet, dead dog.
Yeah.
And so he explained it to the general manager. The general manager come back to me, says, what's the fix? And I said, the only way to get that smell out of the car is an acid wash. You've got to completely clean the spores out of where they're growing.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to kill them. And if you can't use radiation, you got to use acid. It's the only way. So I mean, there are professional companies that will do that for you, but it's costly.
Mm-hmm.
But let's face it, you've got a car there you can't sell. You're never going to retail that car.
Right.
It's only worth scrap metal the way it sits. So somebody's going to have to wash that car to make it useful again. I said, but once it's done properly, it'd be great. I'd buy it. So they wholesaled the car. They found a wholesaler would just take it as is and get it out of there. And I told them, like I said, by now, I'd been there 6-7 months. I was always the number 2 salesman. So I finally realized I can write my own ticket.
Yeah.
They want to keep me.
Yeah.
I mean, in December, when the average number of deliveries was 3, I delivered 14 cars.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that Santa Claus was coming didn't slow me down.
Yeah.
You know, everybody else goes, oh, it's Santa time, and people are saving their money for other stuff. And, I mean, car guys have more excuses not to work for any. I mean, it's Halloween. It's you know,
Thanksgiving, deer hunting,
St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
They've always got an excuse. I mean, I look for opportunities.
Right.
And my hobby's flying. Renting airplanes and buying gas for my dad's airplane was expensive. If I wanted to fly, I had to make money. I got to pay for an apartment, pay for a car, pay, you know, everything like everybody else. But I also had to feed the airplane.
Right.
There was no other way. So I had to hustle. Anyway, and the management at Action Olds was impressed that I flew airplanes. I mean, most of the guys there played golf.
Right.
Well, golf costs you a little bit of money,
Yeah.
but it's not that much.
Right.
And I mean, I'm paying that much just for an hour, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that'll cause you to do things differently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while I worked for Scott Coburn, I became a private pilot.
Mm-hmm.
I got my instrument rating with the VA's help. Got a commercial license with the VA's help. And I pretty much thought that's my bucket list.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a commercial pilot. I wanted an instrument rating, and I'm set for life. I mean, I'm only flying single-engine airplanes, but that's all I wanted to fly.
Yeah.
I really wasn't interested in flying a bus with 2 engines and people in the back. And,
Right.
you know, just give me little jobs. I'll be happy. There's more flying with little jobs anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I was still looking for that little job, you know.
Right.
I really didn't want to be an instructor. I knew regulations, I knew weather, I knew communications and all that stuff. And the idea of trying to teach somebody and then being responsible to say they know what they're doing really didn't appeal to me.
Right. You wanted to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was your
I wanted to
thing.
be in command of my own
Right.
self.
Right.
And as pilot in command, I was the captain.
Yeah.
Any airplane I got on, as far as I was concerned, if I was flying with somebody and if it had dual controls, I was the captain.
So having a job was a way to pay for your flying habit.
Yeah, that's all I worked for.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
so how long did you stay in the car business then?
over 8 years.
Okay. All right. And what did you do when you got out of the car business? Because you still got a flying habit.
Well, I finished up at Action Olds.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, their inventory was disappearing.
Right.
We were mostly selling used cars at this time. And I felt bad for the owner of the place, but we were going to starve to death.
Yeah.
Well, my friend Jerry, the number 1 guy, had left the store a few months before me. He had been there before, and he left before me.
Mm-hmm.
He got a job with a store in Wayne, Michigan, on Michigan Avenue, called Budget Car Sales. It was not Budget Rent-A-Car, it was the sales company that sold the rent-a-cars.
Okay.
And he called me up. He said, "You have to come over here. It's a gold mine." Well, leaving Action Olds, where everybody was scratching to sell used cars, a gold mine sounded pretty good. So I went down to see what he had.
Uh-huh.
So they were selling a lot of Lincoln Town cars, big Oldsmobile, and like 98s, 98 Regencies, big Buick Park Avenues. They had a few smaller GM cars, but most of this was about luxury sedans, American luxury sedans, priced right. I mean, these cars had been depreciated as rental cars, so they might have 15 to 20,000 miles on them, but they had regular maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
They were in decent shape, and they were cheaper than what the dealers had. So, yeah, it looked pretty good.
Yeah, it's a great deal.
So I went over to Budget Car Sales. I was there 14 months. I was always their number 1 or 2 salesman for the month. I also filled in for managers when they were on vacation. So 2 weeks at a time I'd be a manager, and they'd just pay me a flat $1,000 a week. It wasn't as much as I normally made, but
it was a guarantee.
It was guaranteed. It gave me a chance to have something on my resume different than sales.
Yeah.
And I helped helped a lot of salesmen learn how to sell and make money. You know, in other words, I had a salesman, he was a freshly married guy, big Arab type guy. He married a dancer, an exotic dancer. He didn't have the best choices in life. I mean, to me, that's just looking for trouble.
Right.
But he loved her, you know. He was infatuated.
Oh, yes.
And the weekend he was getting married, I was driving a demo. It was a Pontiac Grand Prix, Burgundy. Real pretty car. But it was inventory. I mean, anybody could have sold it at any time. And he begged me, he says, could I have that for the weekend? I'm getting married, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know who he was getting married or anything. And I said, yeah. I said, I got my and by then I had purchased a Tornado at Action Holds. I got an 83, a used car trade-in. It was a GM owner, worker that owned it. The car had never seen rain or snow. You know?
Yeah.
It spent its whole life in a garage. At low miles, beautiful car. And it was light blue with a dark blue interior, which is a combination I happen to like.
Oh, perfect.
So I told the salesman, fine, take the burgundy car. Well, Monday morning he was a little late for work. Figured, well, if he got married, he's probably going to be late. Because I knew he wasn't on vacation. And finally he gets dropped off by somebody. He comes in and reports that the car was stolen. And he felt very sheepish telling me
Right.
about I said, well, you didn't steal it. I didn't lose anything. What, you know, I don't feel bad. I said, I hope for your sake it turns up, but otherwise it's going to be an insurance claim and there's going to be a deductible involved. You're darn well sure they're going to charge you for it. So at the end of the week, the car turned up. And the car was still pretty good looking, but it had a budget would put these heavy case steel enhancements to the steering column to prevent theft. And that didn't slow these guys down. They cracked that thing off like nothing. And so the car was sitting in a police garage downtown somewhere. And so we had to go get it. And they told us, you'll need a screwdriver to start it. I'm thinking, what the? I need a screwdriver to start. So I told him, I said, I got the salesman responsible. And I said, you're driving me down. We're going to do this on your time.
Yeah.
You lost it. This is your penance. You got to leave time on the floor. It's probably going to cost you an hour or two, and so anybody else gets those ups, Anyway, so I get down there, and sure enough, the column has been cracked. The key lock mechanism is gone, so there's no lock on the steering wheel. And when you turn a key on a column, it's actually pushing a lever to basically a starter button. So what I had to do is stick the screwdriver in there to start the car, take the screwdriver back out, and I could drive the car.
Right.
And then later on, we'd have to send it to a shop and have it fixed. So, excuse me. So we did that, and I went and got the car, brought the car back. Management didn't want to take time trying to fix the steering column, so they just wholesaled the car.
Yeah.
No problem. Out of sight, out of mind. They didn't lose anything. We just didn't sell it retail,
Right. Right.
And so that was the end of it. Didn't cost anybody anything, really. We had a manager, when I first got there, had come from a Sterling Heights GM store. And this guy was a very fastidious type of person, very precise, wanted everything just so. We would catch him outside trimming the lawn with scissors just to make a tree look good.
Right.
For the customers, or anything was to make things look better. And we got in a car. It was a Cadillac Seville, kind of an unusually shaped body. Had like almost like a boot on the back rather than a flat trunk. It had like a hump trunk. I liked the car. It was front wheel drive, 4-door sedan. Kind of classy. It was light yellow, which was not my color. I'm not into Florida colors, but the mechanics of the car were good, and I knew they drove really nice. So he got that car as a demo. He put money into it. He had things added to it. And one thing you don't do with used cars is put money into trim.
Right.
You might have to buy tires or brakes or something like that. That's where you put the money. You don't put it into like baubles and furniture and, new seats. And well, he did that. He new seats, new interior. I mean, he's dressing up. Well, the car business, they used to call it an old whore in a new dress.
Right. Right.
That's what it was. So that's the kind of thing this guy did. And one day we had a sales meeting. It was on a Saturday. Well, we had a sales meeting regularly. We had a sales meeting Saturday morning because, not being a national brand, we worked weekends. We were open 6 days a week. That was an adjustment for me, but the money was good, so I made it. Anyway, one day some gentlemen came in from Budget Car Sales main office, wherever that was, and it was a business manager with 2 goons. And they literally picked this guy up by his shoulders, one on each arm, and carried him out of the office. His name was Max. He said, "Max, you're done."
Wow.
So they drove Max to his house to go get the Cadillac back and brought that back to the store. Handed him a cardboard box. He could put whatever he could fit in it from his desk, and they carried him back out again. That was the last we ever saw of Max. And I think it was mostly about just plain mismanagement. I don't think he was stealing anything.
Right.
It'd be very hard to do any of that because there was so much paperwork to everything. There was a paper trail everywhere. He had a big business office, but there were a lot of professional people in there. And the last few months I was there, they were short a business manager. Somebody had left the business. And the business manager would handle all the financing for the customers. So we had one main business guy and 2 auxiliary business managers. There were 3. This store was big enough to have 3 business managers.
Yeah.
Most stores have 1. But we did a lot of business. We did a lot of business fast, like in the evenings. I mean, there were people going through this store like there was a boulevard out front they were coming down and lining up in. And so the showroom was very busy. And but we were also had good inventory. We had an unending supply of vehicles.
Right, because they would come in and They would rotate them out on a regular basis, right?
But not only budget. We bought cars from Alamo.
Mm-hmm.
We bought cars from, well, you name it.
Yeah.
If it was a leasing, you know, a leasing or rental company, we'd buy their inventory and sell it. And sometimes we got cars in before even new car dealers had.
Mm-hmm.
Car dealers had them. When GM came out with a small car, smaller than the Sierra, Oldsmobile and Buick both had the same basic body. It was the
Right.
same chest.
They were all GM. They were just
Yeah.
built a little bit different.
So the bodies were built in the same line. The trims were all different.
Right.
So, and even Pontiac. Pontiac was around back then. So Pontiac, Buick, and Oldsmobile all had this car. I can't remember the name. It was called a Cutlass something. So they used the name Cutlass as a hook.
Right.
But it didn't have any relation to real Cutlass.
Cutlass stopped being Cutlass in the mid-'70s, early '80s.
The Cutlass Supreme was the car
Yeah.
people liked.
Yeah.
The little Cutlass was like the baby Cutlass, looked like it fit in the trunk of the first one, you know.
Right.
But I ordered one because it was very streamlined, pretty old car. So I ordered a brand new one for myself. Car came in and I sold it to my sister. She just happened to need a car, and I said, well, I just happen to have the right car for you.
Mm-hmm.
This one already has my name on it. I'm happy to put your, you know, title to you. So I sold her the car. Anyway, we had, at Budget Car Sales, we had 6 of the Pontiac models.
Mm-hmm.
Before the Pontiac dealers had any. We already had them. And they were slightly used. You could see how many kilometers on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
We got them from a Canadian leasing company. So they were all this instrumentation was Canadian.
Right.
You know, it was in liters instead of gallons, and you know, so if you could handle kilometers on your speedometer, where the big numbers were kilometers and the little numbers were mile per hour,
Yeah.
then you'd be happy. And Pontiac dealers were outraged. They couldn't believe that a Budget Car Sales, not affiliated particularly with any brand, had 6 of these things, and they didn't even have the brand new ones yet. How did we do it? And nobody knew. I mean, we were advertising them, but they were Canadian.
Yeah.
And so strange things happen. And there was a car show in Detroit, and we put a bunch of our cars on the showroom floor there. Well, they called it a showroom floor.
Yeah.
It was a designated area. We were opposite the guy selling meat grinders, you know. But we had a half a dozen cars there, and most of them were Lincoln Town cars. And people could climb in them, sit in them, look at them, you know. When a lot of other cars were all locked up, ours were available to see and touch, and that's what sells cars. Get people hands on metal, and they're going to buy it more likely than ordering from a book somewhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so at the end of the show, we were going to have to get the cars out of there the next morning. A porter took a bunch of our guys down there to get the cars. Guess what? The night before, at the end of the day, somebody locked all the keys for the car in the trunk of the town car.
Oh no.
Including the keys for the town car. So the cars are all sitting down there. The keys are in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get to them. And they're panicking. What do we got to go? We're going to have to hire a locksmith. I mean, where are we going to get a locksmith? Like, I mean, they didn't know there are emergency locksmiths, but
Yeah.
what are we going to do? And they're all panicking. I mean, the office is in an uproar, this and that. And I said to them, you want me to fix it? And they said, would you? And I said, just give me somebody to drive me down there. I said, oh, by the way, I got to go in the back for a minute. So I went in the back to our shop. We had a maintenance shop.
Yeah.
And I got a length of wire. Just cheap copper wire. Thin stuff. So I took a spool of that and went down there. And they're all in a tizzy. And the amazing thing is the car's doors were left unlocked. The problem was the power trunk lock wouldn't work because it was external of it wasn't the glove box kind, it was another kind.
Yeah.
And without the ignition on, you wouldn't work. So what I did was I went and put one end of the wire on a battery, ran the other one into the round around the trunk lock, touched the button, the trunk popped open. That was it. It didn't take me 2 minutes.
No. Problem solved.
Out of the box thinking, you know.
Right, right.
Another marine wonder. And, you know, just the way you look at things, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, solved that problem. Got a ride back, went on with my day.
Yeah.
But I was doing stuff like that all the time. There was always something
Right. Right.
mechanical or whatever that just needed attention, and yeah, you just have to think about it differently, you know. So I went from budget to Wood Motors. One of the guys I met at Budget, I later became a roommate with, his name is Mark. He was the #1 salesman most of the time. Big, gregarious young guy, get people laughing. They laughed with him like he was an old lost family member. They didn't even know why they were laughing. But he had that he had been a bartender previously. He had a way with people. You know, he'd get a guy really looking at a car, you know, and you'd see the guy maybe had a little bit of interest, and he'd describe the car as a real panty dropper. So the guy would buy the car.
Well, yeah, of course.
Because it's a, you know, he can brag to his buddies that he bought a panty dropper, you know. The craziest stuff.
Anything to sell a car, right?
I'm trying to keep a straight face.
Right.
You know. Anyway. But Mark was a hoot. And the thing was, he didn't know much about cars at all. I mean, he knew how to drive them. That was about it. He couldn't work on under the hood if his life depended on it. He didn't understand anything under the hood.
Yeah.
They just had a way with words. And that's what people wanted. Well, Mark had left Budget, went to Wood Motors. Guess what? Another gold mine. Calls me up. Wood Motors needs a new salesman. They want you. I said, really? I said, how badly? He says, they're going to send a car for you and pick you up for lunch.
Wow.
They're going to bring you back here, you know, let you see everything. We'll get a bite to eat and they'll drive you back. So I went. They picked me up in a big Mercedes.
Oh, yes.
And they drove me back to the Wood Motors on Gratiot, south of 8 Mile. And they had new cars. They had Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, and Honda. Later, they added Mitsubishi, and they bought a Volvo store. So it was 5 new cars, all foreign cars.
Yeah.
Plus a used car lot. So I'm on the used car lot. And the way they got me in there was they told me they were building, or they were going to build a new showroom for what they called high-line exotic cars. Ferrari, you know, a Jaguar, Porsche. And that's really the ultimate car I wanted to sell. I wanted to be known in Detroit as an exotic car salesman.
Right.
because when you're dealing on that level, you start dealing with the upper class or the money class that
Right.
buys those kind of cars, sports people, things like that. Like I said, I don't know a damn thing about sports, but
That's where you wanted to be.
that's where the money was.
Yeah.
I said, I'd rather sell one car a month and make $5,000 than 5 cars a month and make $2,000 or something, you know.
Right, yeah.
Again, everything's going into the airplane, into flying. I mean, I'm flying airplanes. That's what I do.
Yeah. If you only got to sell a couple cars a month, you got more time and money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go to work for Wood Motors. I'm there several months. I'm selling Volkswagens and Hondas. I can't barely get into these cars.
Yeah.
And there are no Highline cars. I mean, we'd occasionally get a trade-in or something, like an SDL, which is a long body length diesel.
Yeah.
And I remember one we got in particular. It was medium blue, had a diesel engine, gold wheels, gold trim. I mean, the car had been pimped out.
Right.
And it had been a drug dealer's car. Well, the problem was nobody wanted that car because the cops all knew it as a drug dealer car, you know, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to be seen in it. They figured they'll get pulled over in a heartbeat, you know. And I mean, we were in Detroit, you know. So they had I don't know how much money they paid to put all that trim on a car for the guy, but he paid for it.
Right.
But it would cost a fortune to get that trim off of there again.
Yes,
So
it
it
would.
was just easier to sell a car for scrap or whatever and take your nicks. And so we didn't really have much of an inventory. I told them I wanted to buy a Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
I said, put my name on the list for a good trade that comes in. I don't mind if it's got miles on it, if it's been maintained.
Right.
And we did. We got one in. It was a 73 280 sedan, 4-door, little boxy car. Rode great. I mean, 70 miles an hour. You didn't hear anything. You didn't feel anything. You could drive that car for thousands of miles and be just as fresh stepping out of it as the day you got in it.
Yeah.
And it was a 6-cylinder gas engine. I bought the car with air. And I had it probably 3 months, and friends of mine fell in love with it and insisted I sell it to them. And I did.
Right.
I said I really didn't plan on selling it this soon. I was going to keep it, you know, for a few years, and I wanted to work my way up to a Mercedes Roadster.
Yeah.
I like the SL model.
Yeah.
And we had one come in. It was an 86, which is the last year of the old body style, the 560 SL with the chrome bumpers and the manual top.
Yeah.
You know, you had to get out to lower the top, that kind of thing. It was the last, but I had a good engine and it had a really good air conditioner. The earlier models were weak on air,
Uh-huh.
but the 560 was a big V8. It had air conditioning to I mean, you could have cooled the whole house with that thing. You know, it'd freeze you out of the car.
Yeah.
And so we got it in. It was a burgundy with a tan interior. Primary colors are red with they call it Palomino interior. Red with Palomino was like the #1 color in the United States.
Uh-huh.
It was the easiest car to sell ever. Used, best value. They started going down if they weren't red and Palomino.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this car was burgundy and Palomino. It was a beautiful car. The only flaw it had was the dash had kind of like, it looked like a melted mart, or maybe something hot touched it. And I got a customer on the car. He'd seen it advertised in the paper. He came over, and he was the son of a tool manufacturer, and he was like vice president of the company. And you know, and he had recently been married, had a new home, had a new baby, gorgeous wife, and he wanted to buy her something nice for his birthday, and she liked Mercedes convertibles.
Yeah.
But she just wanted a convertible.
Yeah.
He decided she was going to have a Mercedes convertible. She was that kind of classy lady. She'd look good in it. So he came over to see it immediately. So, you know, started working a deal. And so I took him for a drive in it, let him drive it, make sure that's what he wanted. He says, yeah, this is it. So I said, well, financing was like no problem at all. This is the first customer I had over there that had no bad history ever. I mean,
Right.
he had, I think he carried an American Express Platinum card or something, you know. Anyway, could have bought it on the credit card, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And but he was kind of concerned about that little mark in the dash. I said, well, if it's part of the deal, I can have the dash replaced under warranty. This car still has warranty on it. And that's a manufacturing flaw. I mean, you can see it came that way. It wasn't something that happened to it later. So we ordered a new padded dash for it. And new padded dash came in, had the same mark in it. So obviously that wasn't going to work. And we said, well, rather than risk screwing the car up trying to get the old dash out and put the new one in, we recommend you take it with the dash as it is. And they gave him a little adjustment on the price.
Right.
He was happy with that. You could, I mean, unless you weren't looking for it, you really couldn't see it. So, and from the driver's seat, you couldn't see it at all. So I worked out a delivery for him. And most deliveries were done right at the dealership. People came in, signed the papers, handed them the keys, and they drove away happy. That wasn't how he wanted to do it. It was her birthday that Saturday. Wanted to give it to her for her wanted to have it in the garage for her birthday. How do we do that? Look, I can't take it home on Friday. She'll see it. It won't be the same effect.
Right.
The store is closed on a Saturday. How do we? I said, well, let me talk to management. So what I had him do was I had him detail the car and then park it on the used car lot behind the fence. And I said, you'll have to leave the keys, you know, somewhere.
Right.
And you'll have to tell the guards to open the gate for me when I get there, because I'll come over Saturday morning, pick up the car, deliver it, and they'll drive me back.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll drive me back. And I can get back in my car and go. So my car is going to be on the street. Well, I didn't want it on the street. I wanted it back behind the gate. So I said, the security's there all 24 hours. So just tell them park, you know, let me park my car inside. This sounds so simple. It wasn't.
Never is.
So they decided, well, if they're detailing this really, really pretty car, they didn't want to leave it on outside overnight behind a chain link fence. They wanted to lock it in the driveway to the shop, you know, the service entrance. So the security guy would have to let me in the building. I could raise the doors, drive the car out, that sort of thing. So I did that. Of course, when I got there, the security guy didn't know anything about it.
Right.
So that meant calls to the owners. I had to track one of them down. They said, yeah, it's Don Roach, yeah, anything he needs, he's fine. We trust him with anything, whatever he wants to do. And so I had a good reputation with him. Like I said, I was always like number 2, one or two.
Right.
So I was making really good money. And, for that store, And so I drove the car. The guy's house was out the other side of Ann Arbor. So I found the house. Wife was off playing tennis.
Uh-huh.
Dad was home with a baby. Really cute baby. Anyway, we put the car in the garage. We put a ribbon on it. He had a ribbon for it, so I put a ribbon on it. I was sitting in the kitchen waiting, So she comes home from tennis, opens the garage door, and there's her present. They have a moment together to celebrate the new deal. She's got the baby with her, and she's sitting in the car, and she's just so thrilled, and you're so kind, and you're so generous, Well, one look at her, and I understood why this guy was so generous, because this was the most drop-dead gorgeous woman I ever saw in my life. She's wearing a tennis outfit, which is like a sleeveless blouse with a frilly, a pleated skirt.
Right.
A white skirt, white top. Had like a blue trim or something. And she was right off of a magazine, cover. She was model-esque. You'd never know she had a baby by her body.
Yeah.
And of course, the purchaser asked me to take her out and teach her the car, because there were unique things to learn about it. He already knew how to tune the radio. I taught him that. That was a German blow-punk radio, that was a little different than what he was used to. It was digital. And like I said, I had a manual top, which also had manual locking levers.
Right.
So when you put the top up, you'd stick a little stick in the slot, lock the levers, and pull the sticks back up. And don't lose the sticks.
Right.
You're never going to get that top off again.
Right.
So, and it had a unique way to lock the rear part of it, because the whole top would fold up and come out. So you had to lock both ends down.
Uh-huh.
And the back one latched on a single peg in the back. You had to push it into a certain point, and then there was a lever on the side you push forward that snugged the top down.
Yeah.
So it was an involved process. It worked really good. You had pretty good seals once it was up, but it took a moment. So I'm going for a ride with this gorgeous lady, very nice personality, and it's clouding up fast. Those clouds came out of nowhere.
Right.
And this is kind of hilly country out there, and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, we need to find shelter. And I suggested to her, why don't you pull into a drive-in somewhere where they got a roof? Because I think we're going to need it.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't make it.
Oh, no.
Cloudburst came over and whacked us. I'm wearing a sport coat,
Right.
What she's wearing turned transparent in rain.
Yeah. Yeah, white clothes, when they get wet, that'll happen.
And if she had any undergarments on, they weren't much, because they turned transparent. So I'm sitting with this woman, and it's like standing next to a friend's wife in a shower.
Right.
you didn't expect her to be there.
Right.
You know? And you're looking at each other like,
Very uncomfortable.
and she's just carrying on like she's driving her car, you know, and she's laughing. Oh, I get rained on in my first time out in my new car, yeah. And she's looking for, I told her, I said, well, find a bank or
Yeah.
a gas station, anything with a roof over it we can drive into. I finally pointed one out to her and we pulled in. So while she was sitting there, I showed her how to work the top. And there is a manual in, I told her, there is a manual in the glove box.
Right.
It's just like any other new car. This one has one. And it goes step by step how easy it is to do. And she was still laughing by the time we got back to their house, you know. And of course she gets out of the car and her husband's looking at her like, holy cow, what happened to you? You know, he's looking at me and I'm looking like, you know,
It rained.
what can I say?
Yeah.
And so they had a big laugh about it. And he and I dried the car off with some towels, the insides, to drive it back to the store, you know. And he wanted to see how it handled in the rain anyway. And I explained to him, I said, well, the good thing is the transmission starts off in second gear. It'll only go into first if you shift it down into to low. Otherwise, it starts off in second, which gives you more traction in rain and snow anyway.
Yeah.
It's not a drag racer. It's not supposed to beat a Corvette off the line. It'll beat a Corvette top end all day long, but not at the bottom end. So that was cute. Anyway.
Yeah. So how long were you at Wood then? Was that
about 14 months?
Okay.
That seemed to be my. I don't even know if I made it that long.
So where did you go from there?
I went from Wood Motors to Royal Brand Ford.
Okay. And how long did you stay there? 2.5
years.
Okay. So you're starting to get a little more time. And then where did you go from there?
After Royal Brand Ford, I went to Mead Leasing.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. Let me think about that. No, I didn't. I was up in Troy. I went from Detroit to Troy. I went to work for Suburban Toyota Volvo.
Okay. Suburban's still around.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a while now. So would this have been in like the early 2000s then that you went to Suburban?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's about that time.
Okay. And then how long did you stay at Suburban?
90 days.
Okay. And then where'd you go from there?
Let me tell you about Suburban.
Yeah, tell me about Suburban. Yes.
I met Suburban Ford. Well, actually, I took a customer's car in for service at the Jaguar store in Troy, next door to Suburban.
Okay.
And I was standing outside just getting some fresh air, waiting for a ride. And a wholesaler I knew from Detroit, from Wood Motors, comes by and sees me and says, "What are you doing here?" "Well, I just had a customer's car. I volunteered to take it in for service for him." He says, "Well, I'm working right next door. I'm the used car buyer for Toyota, Suburban Toyota Volvo. We need good people. We need Highline salesmen. They want to sell Highline cars. We need a Highline salesman. You got to come over and interview with these people." And I mean, he was so excited to see me there. I thought, well, that's the best reaction I've ever had in this business. So I went next door. So they hired me on the spot. "Can you start Monday?" I said, "Yeah." So I did. So I started that Monday, and we had a sales meeting. Monday morning sales meeting. I've been through thousands of these. Some I hated, some I got out of, and this one seemed okay. They were real.
Yeah.
They were talking about who's got deliveries, and we get delivery schedules. And the news of the day is, well, when we bought this Volvo store from Birmingham Volvo, we inherited this big Volvo, 760 sedan. It was a big four-door sedan.
Yeah.
Burgundy again. This sedan was now 2 model years old, had 24,000 miles on the clock, and hadn't been titled yet.
Oh.
Every manager at Birmingham Volvo drove this car as their demo without selling it. So the Suburban gets it. They've been driving it. Some of their managers from their other stores, they got other stores in that mall, have been driving it as a demo.
Yeah.
But nobody's put it on the floor to sell it.
They need to get rid of this thing.
So it's 2 years old.
Yeah.
Come on, you can't depreciate it anymore legally. I mean, the first owner, Suburban Volvo, depreciated it and got something out of it.
Yeah.
Tax-wise, but that's done. You bought it as inventory with your new store. So this thing is a turkey.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that really saved it is Volvo was doing away with the 760 model. They weren't going to make a big sedan anymore. So if anybody wanted one, this was the last of the limit, you know.
Right.
So they'd already had this car on the floor for 2 months when I got there. They didn't have a nibble on it, which they couldn't understand. I thought, come on, 2 years old?
Yeah, good luck.
In a new car store? Yeah. That belongs out in the used car lot.
Yeah.
Even if it is a new title, it's a used car.
Yeah, it's used all day long. It's used.
The thing is, this one was well used.
Yeah.
You could see from nicks and scratches on the hood that this thing had been out in the weather and, you know, driving around bugs and everything else. So they called me into the office with the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
How would you sell this thing? I said, I'd put a spiff on it. I said, what's a spiff? SPIF, Sales Performance Incentive Fee. In other words, you've got 13 Toyota salesmen. You now have 3 Volvo salesmen, 2 guys and a manager, but the manager is selling manager.
Yeah.
So you got 3 Volvo salesmen. So you got 16 of us on the floor. I said, what's the average commission for a Toyota? They said $500. All right. He said, you're going to need at least a $500 spiff on this car. Well, how do you figure that? I said, why would any Toyota salesman show a customer this car if it's going to make him less money than a Toyota? And he knows Toyotas.
Right.
He doesn't know that car. He can't answer. I mean, other than it's got 4 doors, he can't tell anybody anything about that car. You know.
Yeah.
And I said, and the same thing with a Volvo salesman. I said, we expect to make money when we sell cars. Why should we sell a turkey if it's not going to make us some money?
Right.
It's already been depreciated. And I said, when you got the car as inventory, you bought the store, you got the car as cheap as it's ever going to get. So now it's up to you not to keep it longer than necessary.
Yeah.
Blow it out the door. Get rid of the problem. You'll be money ahead. So they said, okay. So the next day we had a sales meeting in the morning. They said, by the way, we have a Volvo on the floor. All you guys have to do is get a customer out. Turn them over to one of the general managers. We'll sell the car. Like, in other words, they don't want a Toyota guy showing a Volvo.
Right.
He doesn't know anything about Volvo. So we'll sell the car and we'll pay you $500 for bringing us the customer. They didn't explain what a spiff was. They just said it's a bonus.
Yeah.
So everything was going to go good, right? I went down on the showroom floor, sold the car immediately. They had to pay me $500, and they were mad as hell. They were certain that I had set them up. I stole money from them.
You got rid of the car.
I mean, I sold it to people, foreigners that came in the door. I didn't know these people from Adam, you know.
Right.
They wanted to look at a classic car, and I said, well, how about something like this? Oh, it's beautiful. I said, it's on sale. Oh, even better, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I didn't tell them about $500 or anything. So I landed them on the car. I even wrote the deal up, took it to management with a deposit. They delivered the car in an hour. And, I mean, the credit checked out good, everything, come and gone.
Yeah.
But they were mad at me from that day on. They were certain I had set them up somehow.
You bamboozled them.
Yeah. And they couldn't figure out how, but they,
Right?
they had it in their heads that I set them up. And I thought, there's no way I can unexplain anything.
No.
They won't understand it.
No, you're just basically screwed.
Just, you know, the thing was, you should have said, anybody interested in the car, just turn them over to us.
Yeah.
Like, you guys aren't selling that car, we are. And there wouldn't have had been a fee or anything.
Right.
But they weren't smart enough to figure that out.
So did that set the tone for the reason you were only there for 90 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It didn't matter. Let me tell you, they had a board
Uh-huh.
in the office upstairs that showed all the salesmen, showed how many units, how much gross they made, and yeah, it was gross units and gross.
Yeah.
At the end of 90 days, I outsold 90% of the staff added together. I mean, my numbers were astronomical compared to what their numbers. You know, like they'd show the Toyota salesman. All right, they delivered a car here. They delivered another one there. You know, and I sold 4 or 5 of this and 2 of that. And you
Right.
know, I mean, I was selling Volvos out the door as fast as we could get them in. I even sold one where a customer paid for my airline ticket. I flew to Music City Volvo in Nashville, and we had bought a car from the dealership there. I drove it back. I spent a night in Cincinnati at my friend's place. It was on a weekend, and I came back, and Monday morning I brought the car back into the showroom, and we delivered it the same day.
Yeah. They probably hated you for that.
They couldn't figure out how I was doing anything. They just didn't understand it, you know.
Right, right.
And I thought, I just showed you I'll do anything for a deal. I will even travel out of state to sell a car for you. Doesn't that mean anything? The management there was so paranoid. These people were afraid of losing their jobs.
Right.
And everything is based on performance. And you either perform or you're out. Go find somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the nature of the business. What I couldn't understand is if a manager was smart enough to get somebody like me that could produce and didn't cause trouble and wasn't a problem, wouldn't that be a feather in his cap? An incentive to get more people like me?
Right.
I mean, this is a store that had 16 salespeople, 3 selling managers, for a total of 19, I mean, that's a lot of talent and training to put into a system if you're not getting much back for it.
Right.
So the question would be, who should you be rotating, the manager or the staff? You know, if the management had proved they could bring somebody like me on board, and the sales numbers in that office demonstrated it perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean, when you've got one guy that outperforms 90% of the staff added together, there's something flawed. Either they're not getting trained properly, or you're not doing enough to hire the right people to start with.
Right.
You're not looking for the right things in the people. Because there are always people coming in looking for work.
Yeah.
And I had run into this when I was in California. I went out there to start the trucking and air freight company.
Right.
I hurt my back. I couldn't ride in a truck anymore. So I thought, well, if I'm going to stay out here, I need to find outside income. So I thought, I'll try a Chevy store. Maybe I can sell Chevys here. I went to a Chevy store, and I'm driving a 1978 Caprice Classic Coupe.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice look. I mean, this car looked like brand new. It had about maybe 35,000 miles on it, but it had never been hit. It had never been out in bad weather or anything, really. I mean,
Right.
It was a classic car. I had added air shocks to the back, and I had a trailer hitch
Mm-hmm.
for hauling a U-Haul trailer when I moved out there. And but the air shocks actually made the car ride nice.
Yeah.
I could adjust the level to where I liked it,
Right.
you know. And California had emissions restrictions, and most cars that come in from the East Coast or Midwest don't pass California emissions.
Right.
They would have to have a retrofit package added to get the exhaust clean enough to pass their emissions. They ran my car through the test 3 times, and it passed better than anything they had all 3 times.
Nice.
So I only paid for 1 test, but they ran it twice more because
Right.
they couldn't believe the first test.
Yeah, they didn't trust they
Yeah.
didn't trust what they were seeing.
So they tied me up for a whole afternoon while they were testing my car.
Yeah.
And they tried it several different, and like I said, they tried it, and it was flawless. You know, it was a good car. Anyway, I show up at a Chevy dealership in front, driving my Chevy. I walk inside the showroom, nobody home. I'm looking around the showroom, I'm fidgeting, I'm at the reception desk, there's nobody there. I'm
Huh.
looking to see if maybe somebody's hiding around a corner. Maybe there's a break room, you know. I couldn't find anybody. So I start walking down the hall, looking at doors, and I finally see one general sales manager. I knock on the door and I walk in. And there's a guy in there. He's wearing a tie. He didn't have a suit on, but he's wearing a tie. I said, "Excuse me, can you help me?" You know, like he was startled and going, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" I said, "Well, actually, I'd like to speak to somebody about a job." He says, "Well," and right away, he just gets right to the chase. He says, "What makes you think you can sell cars here?" You know.
Yeah.
In other words, are you coming in with a laundry list of clients or referrals, or you know what? And I said, "Well," I said I was in your showroom for 20 minutes. There's nobody there to greet me, and I'm driving a Chevy. You know, I mean, the car's 4 years old. So if anybody pulled up like that in front of me, I would think, well, this guy's looking for a new car.
Yeah.
I said, nobody greeting me. So he takes me by the hand or the elbow and he leads me out in the showroom, and he is appalled that he hasn't got one salesman on the floor. I mean, lights are going, signs are going, they're paying for advertising. And even when the customer shows up, there's nobody here to wait up. What does that tell you?
That's pretty bad.
That's really bad.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, maybe I don't want to work here. Maybe the traffic flow here is so bad, everybody else gave up already, you know.
Yeah.
And he explained to me, he says, well, he says, most of the people I have here have been here a long time. The newest guy is 3 years. So the newest guy here has already been on the job 3 years. He said, I really don't have a place for you.
Uh-huh.
But if you're still looking, you know, like 6 months from now or something,
come see us.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, thank you very much. And of course, I thought I'm never going back, you know.
Right.
So I get in my car and I left, and I didn't go anywhere else. I really thought, well, this isn't maybe such a good idea. And the California business everywhere is different than here. I was told that, you know, if you can sell cars in Detroit, you can sell them anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, well, guess what? You can't.
Right. Not so. Yeah.
Because they don't want to sell them the same way we do here. They sell most everything by referrals and referral lists.
Yeah.
And they mine for that. They don't really anticipate getting business in the door.
Right.
You know.
It's all by appointment, kind of.
My flying buddy and I went to look at a used Ford pickup truck, a Ford Ranchero, which was like the El Camino.
Yeah,
The Ford
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And all he wanted to do was haul 50-gallon drums of avgas to his airplane.
Right.
So he just needed a truck that would carry a 50-gallon can. He didn't care what it looked like. If it was, I mean, it had to be legal to pass emissions and everything, so in half decent shape, but you know, that's what he wanted to do with it. It didn't have to be dressy. And we saw this, we were out riding motorcycles and we saw this thing sitting in the lot. He said, let's come back and look at that on Monday. So after work on Monday, we went out to this Ford dealer. And this Ford dealer was called Cal Worthington. Cal was the guy that ran ads on TV regularly with wild animals. Cal with a lion, Cal with a tiger, Cal Worthington with a whatever, you know, cheetah. Yeah. And they mean, come down, Cal Worthington. You know, well, this was Cal Worthington. So here we are. We parked the motorcycles. They had a real high porch in front of their showroom, and they had angled parking in front for customers. We're there, nobody else. We park our 2 motorcycles. We got recent model motorcycles, both had practically brand new motorcycles.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon in California. So we go out to the lot and we're looking at this pickup truck. And nobody comes out to greet us. So we give up. So we're already heading back to our bikes by the time a salesman comes out to greet us. And the guy's smoking. And I mean, I can't believe any salesman would approach customers while he's smoking a cigarette.
Right.
I mean, in Detroit, that's just not done. Not if you want a sale.
Yeah.
And he comes out, and you know, saw you guys looking at the Ranchero out here. And I mean, I looked the truck over, And under the truck was painted white. Under the white paint, you could see the name of the landscaping company.
Right.
The paint was that thin. This truck had been rode hard and put away wet,
Yes.
you know? And I told my buddy, I said, I'll guarantee you the bushings on the shocks and everything else are gone. This truck's hit every pothole, every whatever there ever was in California. I mean, they probably flattened the roads by driving this truck down them.
Right.
I said, it's got some wear and tear on it. Be prepared for that when you know, if you should get it, be prepared to rebuild the suspension. And my buddy Frank was a car guy. He understood wear and tear on cars really well. And he had a really nice Lincoln two-door, old body, big square fenders and everything. Beautiful car, very well maintained. And that was his pride and joy. He liked driving that Lincoln. So when he wasn't in a truck, he was in the Lincoln.
Yeah.
So this guy's, you know, and we told him, I said, well, yeah, we had time to look at it 45 minutes ago when we got here, you know. And the salesman apologized. He says, well, he says, the reason nobody came out to greet you was because of where you parked. And we thought, what kind of sense is that? Well, it turns out the way they figured out who got the customer was based on where the customer parked in the slot.
Oh.
So if the customer parked in the slot 1, the oldest guy got it.
Yeah.
If you parked in slot 2, this guy got it. So it didn't matter time of day or whatever, it was based on where the customer parked. That guy came out to greet the customer. We parked like in the middle, and he was in one and I was in another, so they were in there trying to gamble away who would come out in the middle, you know.
Rock, paper, scissors or something to figure out who's going to come see you.
I didn't want to say it, but that's basically what.
Yeah.
So that was their system. And, well, the guy we drew wasn't good enough to ask the right questions, and my buddy was frustrated. He didn't want to, when he got his mind set, that's not going to work.
Right.
Let's get out of here. Let's go fly the airplane or something.
Yeah, you might as well. Well, let me ask you, so you've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then, so when you were finally done in the car business, did you go into a different type of work?
Yes, sir. I finally decided I'd had enough of car sales.
Uh-huh.
Because it was the same thing over and over. Same
Right.
kinds of problems, same kinds of stupidity.
Same people too, right?
And I mean, yeah, it was like, okay, they got new faces, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And nobody's getting any smarter.
Yeah.
I can't work for it. And I thought it's time I went work for myself. Went into business consulting.
Oh, okay.
One of my car buddies and I, his real name was Buddy. He had a master's in accounting. I think it was from Michigan State. He was former Army. He loved sports. He knew everything about any sport I ever heard of, way more than I was ever going to know, and I really couldn't absorb it anyway.
Uh-huh.
You know, you absorb things you like.
Right.
I like flying, so I knew stuff about flying. I still know.
Right. And you'll never forget it.
Even my stroke couldn't wipe that out.
Yeah.
But he was that way about sports, and he had tried out he was young, early 20s. He was married, and he tried out for a major league ball club.
Mm-hmm.
And one day he got 2 pieces of mail. One of them offered him a contract as a catcher, and the other was a draft notice.
Oh boy.
The same day. Well,
We knew where he had to go, right?
crossed the big pond to Vietnam and
Yeah.
in the Army.
So you got these 2 Vietnam vets, and you guys formed a company then.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about it. But so, is that what you did up until you stopped working? Did you do consulting?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
That was
So
it.
it's kind of what you retired from.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
And
so you and your buddy get together.
yeah,
Okay.
so we get to talking about business and things like that, and things we were looking forward to. We're both problem solvers,
Right.
and we had 2 different slants on things, but we could coalesce into one big answer to something,
Yeah.
you know. And we had done this in car sales together. When we worked for me leasing company, we partnered up.
Mm-hmm.
We decided that whoever sold a car, whatever, would split it with the other guy. And we see if we can make a business out of it together.
Yeah. Work as a
And-
team.
And it was working. We were both making money. Some one month I'd make more than him, and so it evened out. And next month he'd make more than me, and that evened out.
Yeah. Kind of take the peaks and valleys out of the whole
Yeah,
situation.
made everything more level and a lot easier to cruise down the street, you know.
Oh yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Because you knew you had twice the chance of getting deals done than that you would have singly.
Right.
And I was always able to put deals together to package stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how I got into that or how it happened, but I was in the right place at the right time.
Right. Well, it's probably just how your mind works too, just how you do things.
One of the deals I had in leasing was for 2 Cadillacs.
Mm-hmm.
Management got a call. It was a doctor looking to replace 2 Cadillacs. He wanted 2 new ones for the 2 old ones that he had.
Yeah.
And those cars were both coming off a lease. So he was basically no trade-in. It's just if you can get me out of my lease really quick, you know. So we did have to get a buyout for the 2 cars on the other lease. Anyway, he wanted to buy these 2 Cadillacs. And he didn't care where they came from. He just wanted 2 well-equipped Cadillacs. And the only really condition was he had old-fashioned telephones in the other 2, and he wanted them switched to the new ones.
Right.
That's what they were comfortable with, and that's what he wanted to do. Didn't want to look at new phones or talk about anything else. You know, I mean, cell phones weren't really big back then, but yet.
Right.
They had just come out.
Right.
So it was like, okay, man wants equipment switch, we just pay somebody to switch the equipment, you know, electrician,
Yeah.
car guy.
Yeah.
So he knows I'm experienced with all kinds of makes and models and stuff. So he gives me the deal. So the doctor is Dr. Donald Austin is one of the top neurosurgeons in the country, specializing in brain embolisms.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I have trouble with that word.
That's a tough word.
Especially when you don't use it every day.
Right. Right.
I don't talk about it, brain emblems every day, you know. So, anyway, Dr. Austin was a really good guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was a smart man. And I had heard his name before. He had saved the life of Scott Coburn's wife, the man I worked for 8 years.
Yeah.
and she went to Dr. Austin with a brain embolism. So he was highly skilled, highly sought after. I think he was out of Harper Hospital. Just vague memories. But what I had to do was go down to his office, meet him there, and discuss what he wanted to do, so I could save myself some legwork, getting everything, going the right place at the right time. And I had to get both of his cars appraised for a buyout to pay off the old leases.
Yeah.
So I took his car from the office, drove it back to where my appraiser was, got the car appraised, returned the car to Dr. Austin. I had to take him his keys back, and then I had to drive back to his house to meet Mrs. Austin, whose first name was Rudale.
Okay.
And she's these are society people.
Oh, yeah.
These are people featured in the Detroit society pages a lot.
Yeah.
The Austins attended the ballet, or the Austins attended this concert, or yeah, they're that kind of people. And those are the people I really want for customers. Those are good people.
Yeah.
So I'm in the kitchen, a huge kitchen in this ranch type house in Grosse Pointe. And Mrs. Austin's scrambling through these kitchen drawers trying to find her keys. So I get the keys to the Cadillac, take it in, and get an appraisal on it, drive it back, and call the leasing company, get the payoffs, find a buyer for the cars, wholesale.
Yeah.
And because we didn't have a used car lot, we didn't retail anything like that. We just strictly leased new vehicles.
Right.
And so that made it pretty easy, 1, 2, 3. And I got the 2 new cars from Don Gooley Cadillac. And I'm at Don Gooley. The general manager introduces me to their business manager who handles the paperwork and everything.
Right.
And put them on a GMAC lease, And so I had it all figured out to present the deal to the doctor. And I'm dealing with a very astute, fast-thinking businessman.
Yeah.
This Dr. Austin was one of the best customers I had because I could speak to him very fluidly and transfer information quickly.
Right.
He didn't have to take time to absorb things. He knew what you were talking about when you opened your mouth. Anyway, so I showed it to Dr. Austin. He says, okay. He says, what's the difference? Like the difference in monthly payments,
Yeah.
I said, well, the difference in your payments is about $600. This includes the phones and everything. 600, that much, huh? The guy's making millions. What do I,
Right.
but he's careful with his money.
Right.
And he's got family that he's
Right.
helping out. He says, wow, $600. And he looks concerned. I said, doctor, you look concerned. I said, I think maybe I didn't explain it right. I said, your new payments are $600 a month less than what you were paying. And he sat right up. He says, less? Like, I expected new cars to go up, but I'm driving cars that are, 3 years old, and you're telling me 2 new ones are going to cost me $600 a month less than those did.
Wow.
Well, how fast a sale do you think that was?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He was ready to
That makes complete
grab the
sense.
pen out of my pocket and sign the papers right then.
Right.
And I said, let me put it this way. Doctor, the people you dealt with last time are no longer in business. The state closed them down. They aren't, they can't sell a car in Michigan or lease it in Michigan. The leasing company's been closed down.
Yeah.
it's a holding company that has the note on the cars. So those people are out of business. They've already been punished for gouging customers. In other words, they were leasing cars at over the value of the car, claiming that was the value. You know, they were inflating the value so they could lease at higher amount. And
well, it's all profit, right?
yeah, but it was all fraud.
Right. Yeah.
On the customers.
Yeah.
And I said, if there's ever a class action suit, you might see money back from that, but you'd have to, you know, sign on the dotted line with the attorneys and go through a whole lawsuit process, and then they'd have to find somebody to pay the money back. You know, that had the money.
Yeah.
But of course, those people are all bankrupt and gone.
Right.
So
no one's got any money now at all, anyway, out of that deal.
So it was a scam, you know.
Yeah.
I said, but me, you know, you don't have to worry about that through Mead Leasing. You know, that's Mead Leasing is a Class A dealer. They own new car dealership. They got a Lexus store. They got this and that. I said, you know, they're not going to risk their licenses for something that stupid.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So he was very happy, and I delivered the cars, and Mrs. Austin was thrilled, and she loved the way everything worked, and first time, and she went sailing off to some luncheon somewhere, you know.
Right, right.
Show off her new car. Doctor went back to work. That's what he did.
Of course, of course.
But yeah, so I had some fun doing it. I mean, you do it right, and you have some fun. So anyway, Buddy and I started a business consulting company, and our principal idea was we wanted to be the guys that dealt with angels. Angels are investors looking for opportunities.
Right.
Where do angels come from? Where do the opportunities come from? Somebody's got to put it together. We figured we could be the guys that did it.
Right.
I mean, you don't know till you try, you know. And I mean, I'm a really good problem solver. You know, I just need to understand the situation. And sometimes I see things a little differently than others, you know.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, people that are trained a certain business way look for certain ways to do things. They don't see opportunities because the opportunities don't fall into that pattern. I'm looking at anything I can look at.
Yeah.
And figuring out, can that help me or not? You know, can I do something with that? Well, we put together a business plan, and we allowed for the fact that we were going to need investors, smaller angels, willing to fund us to go after the bigger angels. So we started doing that. I went back to some of the people I'd worked for in the car business. Guess what? They all wanted to be on board. They'd seen me work. They didn't care how I did what I did. They knew it was legal.
Right.
So they were willing to feed the pot some. So with the help of a number of investors between my side and his, we put together an office in Birmingham. And we first started off in one of these collective offices where you got your name on the door and you're sharing a conference room with 6 or 7 other businesses.
Yeah.
But you booked the time.
Right.
Through the common receptionist that we all use. So you got one receptionist that handles all the calls for all the businesses. She books conference room time if you never even need it.
Right.
You've got separate offices anyway.
Yeah.
So if you got a small meeting, you're not going to book a conference room. why bother? And I was very comfortable with that. I thought we could do a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
From a little bit of space, that we would lease. And Buddy's idea was that we needed a bigger office of our own, with our own staff and everything. I said, well, these are good designs for things in the future, but let's get something going first.
Yeah, start out small.
We got to have revenue.
Yeah.
It's like just the car business, you need to have revenue coming in to do anything else. You have to make up your mind, you're going to generate revenue to start with. And the business plans we came up with, and we had an outline of a business plan, a generic outline that would actually work for a lot of different kinds of customers.
Mm-hmm.
And we made it as attractive for the customer, the person coming in the door, as we could. So we decided we'd help the customers raise money for their projects. We get 10% off the top. And we get a percentage, maybe 30% investment in the company. So if you came to me and said, I want to start a tool and die, I'd say, fine, let's put a plan together, figure out what you think you can do, and what kind of revenue you can generate, in a normal business world.
Right.
And how much money we have to come up with to get you going. I said, bear in mind, angels like a fast turn on the dollar. They don't usually want to be in a project for years and years. They want to see something that makes them some money quick, get 2 to 3 years out of it, and they want to be out.
Yeah.
So they really, really don't want to be much more commitment than that. I don't care how good the business is. They just don't want to stay. They want to go do different ones.
Yeah.
That's what they like to do. So we had been doing our homework on who the angels were and what they liked and whatever. So we decided, okay, we get 10%. We're not asking for 50. We're not asking for 90. That we get 10%. It's a fee that covers our end of things.
Right.
Running around, phone calls, meetings, outlaying expenses. And then we have to have staff to back us up, to help us write papers and things,
Right.
You need trained people. We don't just need street people. We need trained people to do
Right.
this.
You don't just need a breathing body. You need
Yeah.
someone who knows what they're doing.
So okay, so we get 10% off the top. We get, maybe 30% of the company. So we're not asking for anything too outrageous. In other words, we're investing in the growth of our client.
Right.
We're saying that our client is going to do so good the way we help them manage to put this together, they'll be profitable quick. They can pay back the investors as well as paying for us.
Yeah.
And it won't hurt the company, it'll benefit the company. That's the sales pitch. I mean, a lot of these people that come to your door in that business have been other places and have heard horrible, pricey estimates. Like, you pay us $50,000, you pay us, 80% of your company,
Yeah.
And then bargain it down to 50, and I mean, so that every dollar you're making, half of it goes to me.
But you guys were fair.
Is that but are you gonna grow at that?
Right.
You can't even survive at that.
Yeah.
We see that. We don't make it that hard.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping we're gonna get enough business going that we can do well at 30%.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
And we give them first buyout.
So at the end of it, they can buy you out of your stake in their company.
Oh, yeah.
if they
Yeah,
want to do that.
after so many years of production, they could buy it right out.
Yeah. Thank you for watching Veterans Archives. We hope you enjoyed this veteran story. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, like and share our videos, as well as checking us out on social media. We're on Facebook and TikTok, LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. Be sure to check out those pages, share, and like. And for more information about what we do, go to www.veteransarchives.org.